Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The cold barrel of a gun against a temple is usually a deterrent, but for the man pinned against the mahogany desk, the threat felt less dangerous than the two pairs of golden eyes devouring him. You thought you could run. A low voice rumbled, vibrating through the chest of the man pressing him down. You thought you could break my niece's heart, pack your bags, and disappear into the night like a thief. But you forgot one thing, little Alpha. In the Blackwood territory, nothing leaves unless we allow it. Julian Vane gasped, his fingers scrabbling uselessly against the silk shirt of his captor. His instinct as an alpha, to fight, to dominate, to snarl, was being systematically crushed by a pressure so immense it felt like the gravity in the room had tripled. This wasn't just power. This was biology weaponized. Please, Julian choked out, his voice betraying the shameful tremble of his knees. I didn't touch her. I set her free. The second man stepped out of the shadows, a carbon copy of the first, but with a crueler, sharper smile. He trailed a gloved finger down the side of Julian's neck, stopping precisely over the scent gland that was currently pulsating with terror. You didn't set her free, Julian, the second twin whispered, leaning in until his breath ghosted over Julian's ear. You just made yourself available. 3 weeks earlier, Julian had opened his eyes to a ceiling painted with cherubs and the sinking realization that he was dead. Or, more accurately, the old Julian was dead, and he, a 28-year-old barista from Seattle with a penchant for reading trashy web novels, was now inhabiting the body of Julian Vane. In the grand tapestry of the novel The Rose's Thorn, Julian Vane was not the hero. He wasn't even the misunderstood second lead. He was the trash alpha, the arrogant, cheating fiancé of the saintly female lead, Serafina Blackwood. His role was simple: torment Serafina, try to steal her inheritance, and eventually get executed by her overprotective, maniacal twin uncles, the Dukes of the North. Julian had sat up in the four-poster bed, hyperventilating as he stared at his hands. They were larger, calloused, and radiated a strange, restless energy. He was an alpha now, top of the food chain. Or he would be, if the Blackwood twins didn't exist. Okay, he had whispered to the empty, opulent room. Plan A. Break up with Serafina. Plan B. Move to a different continent. Plan C. Never, ever meet the uncles. It seemed like a solid plan. He was gay, after all. The idea of marrying a woman, even a fictional one as beautiful as Serafina, was impossible. He would do her a favor. He would be the one to end the engagement, citing his own unworthiness, and she would be free to find the male lead. He hadn't accounted for the butterfly effect. In the original novel, The Trash Alpha, Julian was obsessed with Serafina's status. He clung to her like a leech. So, when the new Julian started avoiding her, dodging her calls, and sending polite but distant gifts, the narrative began to warp. Serafina didn't get annoyed. She got curious. And where the niece went, the uncles watched. The night of the Grand Equinox Ball was supposed to be his exit stage left. The chandeliers of the Blackwood estate were blinding, crystals catching the light of 1,000 candles. The air was thick with the perfumes of high society, floral omega scents, musky beta neutrals, and the sharp, aggressive spice of alphas posturing for dominance. Julian stood by the buffet table, clutching a glass of champagne like a lifeline. He was wearing a midnight blue tuxedo that cost more than his entire former life's earnings. He felt like an imposter in a tiger's skin. Julian. The voice was soft, but it carried the weight of a thunderclap. Julian froze, then turned to see Serafina standing there. She looked like a vision in white silk, but Julian was too busy scanning the perimeter for the executioners to appreciate it. Lady Serafina, he said, offering a stiff bow. You look healthy. Asterisk smooth, Julian. Real smooth, asterisk. She frowned, stepping closer. You haven't replied to my letters. Father says you're planning to sell the Vane estate. Are you? Are you leaving the capital? I think it's for the best, Julian said, his heart hammering. He needed to be cruel to be kind. Look, Serafina. This engagement. It doesn't work. I'm not the man you think I am. I don't love you. I never will. He expected tears. He expected a slap. What he didn't expect was the sudden silence that descended over the ballroom. The music stopped. The chatter died. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, and two figures walked through the gap. They were tall, impossibly tall. They moved with a synchronized, predatory grace that made the hairs on the back of Julian's neck stand up. They wore identical black military-style dress uniforms, adorned with silver aiguillettes that shimmered under the lights. Their hair was the color of raven feathers, and their eyes were molten gold. Kalen and Draven Blackwood, the twin dukes, the executioners. They flanked Seraphina, one on each side, their gazes locking onto Julian with the intensity of laser sights. Uncle Kalen, Uncle Draven, Seraphina stammered, looking between them. Julian was just. We heard, Kalen said. His voice was cool, smooth, and terrified Julian down to his bone marrow. He doesn't love you. He never will, Draven added, his grin sharp enough to cut glass. Honesty. How refreshing coming from a vein. Julian swallowed hard, forcing his alpha pheromones to remain neutral, though his instincts were screaming at him to drop to his knees and bare his throat. Why is their presence so heavy? In the book, they were powerful alphas, but this felt like something else. Your graces, Julian managed, his voice steady despite the terror. I only wish for Lady Seraphina's happiness. I am not the one to provide it. Kalen stepped forward, closing the distance. He stopped inches from Julian, invading his personal space with arrogant ease. He leaned in and sniffed. Julian flinched. Sniffing another alpha in public was a direct challenge. A declaration of war. Strange, Kalen murmured, his eyes narrowing. You don't smell like rot and cheap cologne anymore. You smell like rain. Cold, ozone-charged rain. Draven stepped up behind Julian, trapping him. Rain? Draven echoed, his voice dropping an octave. I like rain. We need to discuss the terms of this. Dissolution, Kalen announced to the room, though his eyes never left Julian's face. Alone. Before Julian could protest, a hand clamped onto his shoulder, iron-hard and unyielding. He was marched out of the ballroom, away from the safety of the crowd, and into the depths of the Blackwood Manor. The library was soundproof. Julian knew this because the heavy oak doors slammed shut with a finality that echoed in his chest, sealing out the noise of the party. He was shoved, not gently, toward a leather armchair. He caught his balance, spinning around to face them. This is kidnapping, Julian snapped, finding a shred of courage in his indignation. I am a noble of the Empire. You can't just. We can do whatever we want, Draven laughed, stalking toward the drinks cabinet. He poured 3 fingers of amber liquid into a glass and downed it in one go. We are the Blackwoods. The laws are merely suggestions we occasionally entertain. Kalen didn't drink. He leaned against the heavy desk, crossing his arms over his broad chest. He watched Julian with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing a new specimen. Why the sudden change of heart, Julian? Kalen asked. A month ago, you were begging for this marriage. You were desperate for our money, our connections. Now you act as if Seraphina is a plague. I had an epiphany, Julian lied, his eyes darting to the door. I realized I prefer men. It was the truth, technically. He hoped it would disgust them. He hoped they would throw him out for being a deviant to the noble bloodline. Silence stretched in the room, thick and heavy. Draven froze, the glass halfway to his mouth. Kalen's expression didn't shift, but his pupils dilated, swallowing the gold iris until his eyes were almost black. Is that so? Kalen pushed off the desk. He moved slowly, deliberately. You prefer men. Yes, Julian said, lifting his chin. So you see, the marriage is a sham. I'm doing you a favor. Draven laughed, a dark, guttural sound. A favor? Brother, he thinks he's doing us a favor. Draven moved then, a blur of motion. In a blink, he was in front of Julian. He grabbed Julian's lapels and slammed him back against the wall. Hey, Julian shouted, his own alpha aggression flaring. He tried to shove Draven back, but it was like shoving a statue. You have no idea what you are, do you? Draven hissed, his face inches from Julian's. You're a recessive alpha. Weak. Malleable. But you're sent. It's potent. Let me go, Julian snarled, baring his teeth. Save the growling for the bedroom, little wolf, Kalen said, appearing at his side. The sudden proximity of both twins was overwhelming. Their pheromones hit Julian like a physical wave, dark chocolate, gunsmoke, and something ancient and metallic. It wasn't alpha pheromones. It was heavier, darker. You're not alphas, Julian whispered, the realization dawning on him with horrific clarity. The lore of the world rushed back to him. Obscure, hidden lore mentioned in the footnotes of the novel. There was a rank above alpha, a myth, a biological anomaly capable of dominating even the strongest apex predators. Enigmas. Bingo, Draven grinned, his canines lengthening slightly. And do you know what enigmas do when they find an alpha who smells as sweet as you? Julian's heart stopped. No, that's impossible. Biology doesn't work that way. We rewrite biology, Kalen whispered. He reached out, his hand sliding into Julian's hair, gripping the back of his head to expose his neck. We don't usually share, Julian. We are jealous creatures. But you seem to require 4 hands to handle. I'm leaving, Julian gasped, panic overriding his logic. He tried to duck under Draven's arm. Draven caught him by the waist, lifting him off his feet and throwing him onto the desk. Papers flew into the air, raining down like confetti. Julian scrambled backward, knocking over an inkwell, black liquid staining the expensive wood. You aren't leaving, Kalen said, unbuttoning his cuffs with agonizing slowness. You walked into the lion's den, announced you were available, and expected us to let you walk out. I'm not available to you, Julian yelled. I was your niece's fiancé. This is insane. Serafina never marked you, Draven said, climbing onto the desk, crawling over Julian like a stalking panther. You are unmarked, unclaimed, and you smell like you are begging for it. I am not. Your body disagrees. Kalen pointed a gloved finger at Julian. Julian looked down. He was trembling. And worse, he could feel the slick, humiliating heat pooling in his lower belly. It was a reaction that shouldn't be possible for an alpha. But in the presence of 2 enigmas, his biology was betraying him, forcing him into a submissive state usually reserved for omegas. It was a forced heat. Stop this, Julian pleaded, his voice cracking. Please. I'll leave the country. I'll disappear. We don't want you to disappear, Kalen said, stepping between Julian's spread legs as he sat on the edge of the desk. He placed his hands on the desk on either side of Julian's hips, boxing him in. We want to keep you. As what? A pet. Julian spat, trying to summon his dignity. As a mate, Draven corrected, leaning over Kalen's shoulder. A permanent one. The word hung in the air. Permanent. In this world, a mark on an alpha was a death sentence for their pride. It meant total submission. It meant their pheromones would be altered forever, binding them to the enigma. It was a rewrite of the soul. You can't, Julian whispered. Watch us, Kalen murmured. The kiss, when it came, was not romantic. It was a conquest. Kalen captured Julian's lips with bruising force, his tongue invading, tasting, claiming. Julian tried to struggle, to push him away, but Draven was there, gripping Julian's wrists and pinning them to the desk above his head. It was a sensory overload. The taste of Kalen, cool mint and dominance. The heat of Draven behind him, pressing against his side. The crushing weight of their combined pheromones stripping away his will to fight. Julian felt his mind fogging over. The trash alpha's body was weak, instinctively yearning for a leader, a master. And here were 2. Kalen broke the kiss, trailing wet, hot kisses down Julian's jawline. He's yielding, Kalen observed, his voice thick with lust. Good, Draven growled. I'm tired of talking. Draven shifted, his hand moving to the waistband of Julian's trousers. Julian bucked, a gasp tearing from his throat. No. Wait. If you do this, if you mark me, I'll hate you. I swear to God, I'll hate you forever. Kalen paused, looking up. His golden eyes were swirling with a chaotic mix of possessiveness and something surprisingly tender. He reached up, cupping Julian's face. Hate is a passion, Julian, Kalen said softly. It burns just as hot as love. We can work with hate. We prefer it, Draven added, nipping at Julian's earlobe. It makes the breaking so much sweeter. Julian realized then that there was no logic that could save him. No plot armor. No clever dialogue option. This was the dark romance genre, and he was the prey. Please, Julian whimpered, the fight draining out of him as the forced heat spiked, turning his blood to lava. It will kill me. No. Kalen whispered against his throat. It will make you ours. Draven released Julian's wrists only to wrap his arms around Julian's chest, holding him still. Together, brother? Together. Julian screamed as teeth sank into the junction of his neck and shoulder. Not one pair, but two. Pain, white-hot and electric, exploded through his nervous system. It wasn't just physical, it was metaphysical. He felt them tearing through the barriers of his mind, injecting their essence into his soul. It felt like being burned alive and drowned in ice water simultaneously. Kalen bit into the left gland. Draven bit into the right. The symmetry was horrific. The pain was absolute. Julian's vision went white. He could feel his own scent, the smell of rain, being corrupted, darkened. The ozone was being choked by cedar and smoke. The rain was turning into a storm. His alpha nature shrieked in protest, then fell silent, crushed under the weight of the Enigma's command. As the venom seeped into his bloodstream, binding his life force to theirs, Julian had one last coherent thought before the darkness took him. I should have just stayed at the party. Waking up was a slow, heavy process. Julian felt wrapped in cotton. His body felt heavy, languid, and strangely complete. He blinked his eyes open. He was in a bed that was larger than his first apartment. The sheets were black silk. The curtains were drawn, blocking out the daylight. He tried to sit up, but a sharp sting in his neck made him hiss. He reached up, his fingers brushing against tender, swollen flesh. There were bandages there. Careful, a voice rumbled from the left. You're still healing, a voice soothed from the right. Julian froze. He looked left. Kalen was reading a book, wearing reading glasses and a loose robe. He looked domestic, terrifyingly calm. He looked right. Draven was sprawled on his stomach, playing with a switchblade, shirtless. He looked like a satisfied cat. Memory crashed into Julian like a freight train. The library. The desk. The biting. He scrambled backward, clutching the sheet to his chest. You actually did it. Kalen closed his book, marking the page. We did. Check your scent. Draven grinned, rolling onto his back. Julian inhaled. He expected to smell himself, rain and citrus. Instead, he smelled them. He smelled like deep woods, gunsmoke, and cold winter air. He smelled like property. You ruined me, Julian whispered, his voice trembling. I can never show my face in society again. An alpha marked by other men? I'm a laughingstock. On the contrary, Kalen said, standing up and walking to the edge of the bed. You are now under the protection of the House of Blackwood. Anyone who laughs at you insults us. And anyone who insults us disappears. Draven finished, sitting up. Julian looked between them. They were monsters. Beautiful, rich, insane monsters. And he was stuck with them. The bond in his blood hummed, a low vibration that connected him to them. He could feel Kalen's calm amusement. He could feel Draven's chaotic hunger. He wasn't alone in his head anymore. Why? Julian asked, tears pricking his eyes. Why me? Kalen sat on the edge of the bed, reaching out to wipe a tear from Julian's cheek. Because, Julian, you tried to run, and we love a chase. And now that you've caught me? Julian asked, his voice barely audible. Draven crawled up the bed, resting his chin on Julian's shoulder, careful of the bite mark. Now, Draven whispered, now the fun begins. Julian looked at the mirror on the opposite wall. He saw himself, pale, disheveled, flanked by two shadows that would never let him go. The trash alpha was dead. The Enigma's mate had been born. And as terrifying as it was, as he felt the warmth of their bodies pressing against him, a treacherous part of his new biology purred in contentment. The viper hadn't just caught the wolf. They had turned him into their favorite pet. If you enjoyed seeing Julian's desperate struggle crumble before the twins' dominance, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, is it better to be free and alone or loved and owned? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt. Masterpiece, best quality, high-res, 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art, 3 men, BL, yaoi, man 1, center young man, blonde hair disheveled, fearful expression, sweat on face, wearing unbuttoned white shirt, exposing neck with fresh bandages, sitting on bed, submissive pose, hands clutching black sheets. Man 2, Left tall, black hair, cold golden eyes. Wearing silk robe, holding a book, calm dominant expression, standing beside bed. Man 3. Right tall. Black hair, sharp grin, shirtless, muscular build, tattoo on chest, leaning on bed behind man 1. Holding a dagger. Background is dark Gothic bedroom. Heavy velvet curtains, dim candlelight, luxurious furniture, oppressive atmosphere, cinematic lighting, dramatic shadows, intricate details.